Back in 2008, the entire global economy just fell off a cliff. And today, we're going to dig into the story of one company that was right at the heart of it all, Countrywide Financial. And trust me, this isn't just some boring business story. This is about how the American dream of owning a home got twisted into a financial weapon of mass destruction.
I mean, it almost sounds like fiction, doesn't it? How could one company, a single mortgage lender, light the fuse that blew up the entire world's financial system? How did their choices lead to millions of people losing their homes? Well, to figure it out, we've got to follow the money.
And to really get your head around the sheer scale of this, you have to start with this number, $3.8 trillion. That's how much this one company loaned out. For a while there, Countrywide wasn't just a player in the housing market, they pretty much were the market.
But here's the crazy part. This whole story, it doesn't start with some obvious villain. Nope, like all the best tragedies, it actually starts with what sounds like a hero's promise to make the American dream of owning a home a reality for every single person.
Countrywide's rise was just meteoric. Started in 1969, and it just grew and grew until it was the undisputed king of mortgages. And get this, at its absolute peak, 1 out of every 5 home loans in the entire United States came from this company. The CEO, a guy named Angelo Mozilo, was treated like a rock star for helping more people, especially low-income families, buy a home. On the surface, it looked like the perfect American success story.
Yeah, but underneath that shiny exterior, the company was building a financial engine that ran on some incredibly risky fuel. And this is where the story takes a dark turn, and we get to see the toxic formula that would eventually set the world on fire.
So, ingredient number 1 in this toxic mix, subprime loans. These were basically mortgages for people with, not so great credit. The kind of folks that traditional banks would usually say no to. The catch, of course, was that these loans came with absolutely brutal interest rates to cover the risk. It was a huge gamble, but man, was it profitable.
Next up, they threw in something called liar loans. And no, that's not me being mean. That's literally what people in the industry called them. You could just state your income. No pay stubs, no tax returns, no proof required. And guess what? Later on, someone checked, and it turned out that a whopping 60% of these loans had exaggerated incomes. Shocker, right?
And the final ingredient was the adjustable rate mortgage, or ARM. Countrywide pushed these things like crazy. They'd lure people in with this super low, really attractive teaser rate for the first couple of years. But it was a trap, because after that honeymoon period was over, the rate would reset, it would adjust to a much, much higher number. Monthly payments would just explode. They called it payment shock.
So you have to be asking, why on earth would you make so many obviously bad loans? Well, the answer is this whole business model, originate to distribute. See, Countrywide figured out they could make a fortune not by holding on to good loans, but by just creating as many loans as humanly possible, good or bad. For every loan they made, they collected a fee. Then they immediately bundled them up and sold them to Wall Street. And here's the most important part. Countrywide had no skin in the game. If the homeowner couldn't pay, not their problem anymore. The risk was gone.
And this right here, this is what that model looks like. This chart says it all. In just 5 years, Countrywide's business in these super risky loans went from being a tiny fraction of what they did to a $20 billion a year monster. They built a machine that was perfectly designed for insane short-term profit and, as we all know, long-term disaster.
And, like any system that's built on a totally faulty foundation, it was really only a matter of time before the whole thing came crashing down. The house of cards was about to fall.
And boy, did it fall fast. In 2006, the housing bubble hits its peak. Then by 2007, all those adjustable rate mortgages start to reset. Payments shoot through the roof, and people start defaulting left and right. By early 2008, 500,000 Countrywide customers were facing foreclosure, and the company itself was so toxic it had to be bought in a fire sale by Bank of America just to keep it from completely imploding. This just puts the whole collapse into some really stark numbers. At its highest point, Countrywide was worth $24 billion. Bank of America swooped in and bought the smoking ruins for just $4 billion. That's $20 billion of value that just, poof, vanished into thin air.
So after all that damage, after the global economy was brought to its knees, what happened? I mean, was there ever a real reckoning for all of this?
Well, there were fines. Really, really big ones. Since Bank of America now owned all of Countrywide's problems, the Department of Justice slapped them with an $8.7 billion settlement for all the predatory lending.
And what about the CEO, Angelo Mozilo, the guy who ran the whole show? He got hit by the SEC with fraud and insider trading charges, basically for selling his stock when he knew the company was about to tank. He paid a record-breaking $67.5 million, but he never had to admit he did anything wrong.
But you know, those fines, as huge as they sound, they are nothing, absolutely nothing, compared to the real cost. The crisis that Countrywide helped create wiped out $19.2 trillion in wealth from ordinary American families. That's the real price, paid by millions who lost their jobs, their homes, and their life savings.
And the company's official excuse for all this devastation? I mean, this quote just says it all. They blamed everything on normal life stuff, medical problems, divorce, and unemployment. They just completely refused to acknowledge that they had built a system to push loans that were designed to fail onto the most vulnerable people.
So the company is gone now, but this story is definitely not over. The collapse of Countrywide left us with these really deep, unsettling questions about our entire financial system. Questions we're still grappling with today.
For starters, if that originate-to-distribute model was the real poison, shouldn't we change the rules? I mean, should we force lenders to keep a piece of every loan they make so they actually have some skin in the game and their own survival is tied to whether the borrower can actually pay it back?
And then there's the question of personal responsibility. Yeah, the corporation paid a massive fine, but why didn't a single senior executive from Countrywide face criminal charges for actions that had such devastating consequences for literally millions of people?
And that really brings us to the final and maybe the most troubling question of all. If the penalty for blowing up the global economy is just a corporate fine, basically a check written from one big institution to another, and nobody actually goes to jail, does that mean that financial crime on this massive scale has just become an acceptable cost of doing business?